I have, at this point, put in about 13 hours of flight time behind the controls of the Mirai Guardian, specifically the QI. So if you're considering buying one, or if you've already bought one and want to know if you made a good purchase, you're going to want to watch this video. Before we get started, I'd like to ask that you hit that like and subscribe button if you like Star Citizen content with a focus on quality. I publish 3 videos a week and will be adding live streaming to my channel in the very near future. We're approaching the end of our second month publishing videos and I'd really appreciate it. But that's enough of that, let's get into it. I'm very particular about the kinds of ships I buy. I like what I like, and if you've been watching my channel recently, then you know that I'm a huge fan of ships with a complete interior. I also tend to prefer ships that can function in multiple roles, because I like versatility. But I also really enjoy combat in this game. And prior to the launch of the Guardian, the only purpose-built combat ships I owned were the F-7C Mark II and the Redeemer. Other than, of course, my Polaris, but that's more of a Sunday driver than a daily use type of ship. Now, I love both of those ships. The F-7C is just beautiful to look at, and it's amazing to fly around in. It's fast, it's deadly, and 2 of them can fit nicely inside of my Polaris. The only catch in my eyes is that it doesn't have an interior, so it's not a full-time type of ship. And I like long gameplay loops and the idea of extended voyages around the verse. The Redeemer, well, it holds a special place in my fleet as the first ship I owned that I really felt like I could use on a daily basis. But with its recent rebalance, it's lost a lot of its oomph. It doesn't really have the impact it once did. And it has several MFD bugs that just make it difficult to enjoy. On top of that, it doesn't really shine in anything anymore. For me, the Guardian sits somewhere in between the F7 and the Redeemer. It's fast enough for me to feel like I can actually fight smaller, faster ships. It puts out enough damage to feel like I have an impact against larger ships, and it has an interior for when I want to go out exploring and don't necessarily feel like going back to a station or a city for anything but fuel. The Guardian offers the space nomad lifestyle that I enjoy, while still being properly fun to pilot. And between the Guardian and Starlancer Max, which I love, I guess I'm becoming a bit of a MISC guy. So let's get into the reasons why this ship just earned a permanent spot in my fleet. First, let's get the obvious out of the way. Much like the RSI Scorpius, which I recently did a review on, the Guardian pulls design inspiration from one of the most popular sci-fi IPs in history. You'd have to be living under a rock for the past 40 years to not notice its resemblance to the TIE Interceptor, which made its cinematic debut in 1983 in Star Wars Return of the Jedi. The Guardian utilizes very similar design cues with its iconic dagger-like wings arranged in sharp angles, creating an intimidating and aerodynamic profile, sort of resembling the talons of a bird of prey as it reels in its victims in the heat of battle. Which is a long way of saying, I just think this thing looks cool. And let's be honest here, we're flying around in virtual spaceships. Why wouldn't we want to look cool while doing it? Now the Guardian doesn't come with the cargo grid, or seats for passengers or anything like that. But let's be honest, how often do you want to just hop in a ship and go without coordinating with the other crew members that may or may not be in the same planetary system as you? For me, it's pretty often. I have an org, and close friends that play this game, but we're all adults except for my adopted Star Citizen kid, and we all have wildly varying schedules and can't always play together. Now you could use a multi-crew ship as a solo pilot, but the game is structured in such a fashion that a single-seater ship should outperform an undercrewed multi-crew ship in most situations. Did you follow that? And though it doesn't have a cargo grid, you do have onboard storage for personal items and loot that you may find out on your adventures. Bear in mind that only some of the storage is within arm's reach from inside the ship. For example, the gun rack and suit storage, which still isn't functional at the moment, but recent talking points from CIG suggest that should be fixed soon. Trademark. There's more storage for guns and loot located on the outside of the ship, on the tip of the bottom two wings. There's another dedicated gun rack on the port side wing, and an external storage compartment on the starboard side. Though these aren't supremely convenient, it's a nice addition that does allow you to collect at least some extra loot when you engage in things like bunker runs. Now, word on the street is you can also fit a 1 SCU box inside of the ship if you maneuver it up the elevator, but I haven't verified that yet. Now, this next point isn't applicable to everyone, but for people that own capital ships, this is probably a common consideration. It has been verified that the Guardian fits in both the Polaris and the 890 jump hangars. In terms of dimensions, it's only 16.3 by 24.3 by 9.1 meters. That's like 33 washing machines long. You're certainly not fitting more than one into each, but you could probably squeeze some additional Furies into the Polaris hangar if you really wanted some backup fighters. And though I don't usually use the Polaris, I do have plans to do an extended live-aboard series on it, and now I know that the Guardian will be a suitable ship to bring along for the ride in case I want to use a smaller ship to go planetside or scout out a POI. Additionally, CIG recently added ship markers for us, so we can actually find our ships when we're far away from it. I tested this in the PTU, and as far as I could tell, there wasn't a limit to how far we could be, so long as we were in the same system. Hopefully, that hasn't changed. Generally, operating cost isn't something I'm too concerned about, but given the fact that we recently had a wipe, most of us are pretty broke. So on our journey to earn back our fortunes, operating costs are an important consideration. In the 13 hours of playtime I put into this, I maybe spent 60k AUEC on restock and repairs. And with the contract rewards having gone up with the release of 4.0, that's like 3 low-tier contracts. I don't even want to know what it costs to fully repair a Polaris after a day of using it. Now let's get into the meat of the important stuff here. The Guardian is actually pretty effective when it comes to combat. It is a fighter after all. Now it isn't the fastest in a straight line, nor does it have the highest DPS, and it certainly doesn't have the best defenses. But I found it to do just fine in most combat scenarios. In the PU, I've used it to easily work my way up through the ranks and bounty contracts, but given the reputation wipe, I had to go to Arena Commander to test it against larger ships. So I queued up a pirate swarm in offline mode so no one else could help me. And I made it all the way to wave 9 before I had to hop off the game, but here's what I found. My biggest adjustments needed to be made against light fighters. They're just fast, and I am not a seasoned fighter pilot. So the early phases is where my learning happened. Against smaller craft, you're not doing yourself any favors by charging at your opponent, or jousting. You just won't have the maneuvering speed to keep up with them. Instead, once your distances reach about 2.5 kilometers from your target, hit the brakes and start backpedaling. This will keep your guns on target for much longer than if you were to just try and trade in short passes. And being in command of 2 size 5 weapon hardpoints, you just out DPS the little guys. With enough practice in coordinating how you strafe and when to boost, you can generally take a light fighter out, no problem, in one pass. Medium fighters are taken out with similar tactics and are actually easier because they move at relatively lower speeds. Ships like the Cutlass are too slow to outmaneuver you and tend to go down after about 2 magazines, at least from what I found. And I was using the size 5 Galdurian repeaters. Normally I prefer attritions on my ships, but I found that attritions struggle against smaller craft as the projectile velocity is just too low to consistently land your hits, and I'm really looking to build an all-arounder here. Moving on to ships like the Corsair, I'm going to admit here that the 2 size 5s felt a bit anemic against the Corsair. And I'm not sure if that's because of server issues or if the damage just isn't there to take them down quickly enough. For ships in this size category, expect to spend some time taking them down. With that said, it's a long job, but it isn't a difficult one. Corsairs have absolutely no shot at keeping up with you when it comes to maneuvering. Now let's talk Hammerhead. In a PvE scenario, especially now that the server frames are higher, the enemy NPCs actually fire back consistently. This is where things got challenging. Your movement has to be on point and you have to actively weave in and out of volleys, otherwise you're not going to make it. In a PvP scenario, I put my money on the idea that you don't stand a chance. At least if the hammerhead is crude and they're halfway decent shots. But the Guardian is far faster than the hammerhead, and should you encounter one, you should just run away. With that said, I was still able to take down the hammerhead in Pirate Swarm, which felt like it was quicker than the Corsair, which leads me to believe something isn't quite right with the way the server is reporting shields and armor right now. This next point is arguably my most important reason for keeping the Guardian in my fleet. Star Citizen is a game after all. And though I normally prefer larger ships with interiors, the Guardian scratches my fighter pilot itch while providing me similar features to other ships that I really enjoy, namely the walkable interior with full amenities. For me, the amenities in a ship means the ship has longevity, it has staying power. Future gameplay will require that you keep up with your hygiene. Full restrooms take care of that. Current gameplay requires that you keep up with your food and hydration stat, and in the future, kitchens will help you take care of that. Future gameplay will also give benefits and boons to certain armor types in different scenarios, so having a suit locker will allow you to engage in more than one type of gameplay loop without having to go back to a station or city. And you get a logout bed. But the fun comes in when you start flying this thing. Now, as I stated, it isn't the fastest in the verse, at least not going forward. But it can maintain high rates of speed in all vectors. So if you're strafing, be it vertically or horizontally, you're going to be moving fast. And it switches velocity vectors, or accelerates, rather quickly. So though your top end isn't top drawer, your overall maneuverability is reminiscent of the Mirai Fury. It seems that performance is hereditary. And all of that makes for a ship that you can actually enjoy. At least if you're into that kind of thing. And I know not everyone is, so take that for what it's worth. Now, I didn't want to rush this review. Well, part of me did for the views, but then I remembered that I focus on quality and not quantity, and I wanted to make sure that my opinions on this ship were well thought out. So here they are. There are definite downsides to the Guardian. It's pretty squishy, considering it's a heavy fighter. I honestly felt like I had the shields of a light or medium fighter when I was being pressed from all angles during Pirate Swarm. It also follows suit with typical MISC/Mirai landing gear. These things hardly clear the ground, so landing on any rocky terrain might be an issue. The MFDs might take some getting used to. In my first few hours of gameplay, I found myself kind of forgetting that they were there, as they're above where I naturally focus. This goes away with practice though, and maybe I'm just being particular. The button to open the cockpit door is too close to the bed. I've accidentally entered the bed about 6 different times. I don't think it would have killed them to put the button on the other side of the door, and that would have saved a lot of headaches. There are 4 doors from the cockpit to the rear exit, which feels excessive, and it's almost like one of the designers from Crusader might be moonlighting for Mirai. But I also understand that fire isolation will be a benefit when engineering gameplay comes. But other than that, I have to say this: I love this ship. It's given me hours upon hours of fun so far, and I can't wait for the servers to level out so that I can experience more of the game with it. I originally planned to go to Pyro in nothing less than a Polaris, but I kinda think I want to see what the fighter pilot experience is like in such a hostile system. With that said, several of my org mates mentioned that it felt underwhelming to them, so keep that in mind. It's not for everyone. If you're a performance purist, then the F-8C is probably still the ship for you. If you value shields over maneuverability, then the Vanguard is probably the one for you. But more and more, I find myself wanting balance and a very specific list of features, which, as I stated before, might be why I'm becoming more of a MISC fan. With that said, I think that'll end the video here. And now that you know my thoughts on the Guardian, I'd love to know yours. Drop a comment with what you think of the newest ship to hit the Star Citizen universe. And just a friendly reminder to hit the like and subscribe button if you appreciate this video. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the verse.